The topic today is workflow, and along the way, we'll be previewing some of the new features in JUMP 17 coming out in a few weeks. And I have several guest speakers to help me do that. So before workflow, let's talk about flow. Such a cool word. Quoting Wikipedia, in positive psychology, a flow state, also known colloquially as being in the zone, is the mental state in which a person performing some activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement and enjoyment in the process of the activity. In essence, flow is characterized by the complete absorption in what one does and a resulting transformation in one's sense of time. And that definition was pioneered by psychologist Mahai Csikszentmihalyi in 1975, and he has a book out as well. So let's move from flow to workflow. What are some of the most important themes for good workflow? Well, I've come up with 7. And the first is workflow should be fluid. That is, not interrupted by obstacles or detours. Second, workflow should be guided. It should help you walk through the process. It should ask for the minimum number of decisions, and it should not demand that you understand technical jargon. So guided. Third, workflow should help you navigate with a good search facility to find features easily. Next, workflow should be fast. You shouldn't have to wait any longer than necessary. Progress bars should help you wait when waiting is inevitable. And workflow text should be clear and concise. We should not have to decipher jargon or deal with unnecessary detail. So instead of calling something a heteroscedasticity test, we use a simpler term that is a lot clearer, testing equal variation. And instead of a bloated report with all the details, a more concise report is often appropriate. Now, despite clear and concise being good, sometimes the opposite is also good, and it depends on the situation. Instead of being clear, we need to be precise, and instead of being concise, we need to be complete. It just depends on the situation. So next, workflow should enable collaboration. Features should encourage easy collaboration with other team members and stakeholders. You should be able to publish the results so others can see them. So lastly, workflow should be remembered. Once you invest in doing something, doing it again should be easier with facilities to remember, edit, wrap, and package the actions. So there you have 7 themes in workflow: fluid, that is not interrupted; guided, helping you walk through; navigated, finding the features with a good search; fast, not having to wait for things; clear and concise, not having to decipher jargon or walk through excess detail; collaborative, publishing the results to other team members and stakeholders; and remembered and packaged. So doing it again is much easier. So besides the themes of workflow, workflow itself goes in a lot of stages, and you're surely familiar with this. First, you have to bring the data in through import or database query or internet request. And then you need to prepare the data, check it, clean it, transform it, add metadata, then explore it, screen over the distributions of values, relationships, look for relationships and use graphics, and then model it to fit a model, create predictive values, evaluate the results, dig into details, pursue clues, and then report it, arranging the results, refining it, reformatting it, preparing the reports, publish, deliver the results, react to it, respond to questions, make conclusions, pursue actions, and cycle, repeat it, do it again. Those stages are covered in greater detail if you go to jump.com/workflow, and it shows all the blocks that you probably know well involved in the analysis workflow. So the agenda for today: first, Joseph Morgan will introduce a new kind of design designing experiments with the theme of guided, clear, and concise. Then I'll come back and talk about searching to help you navigate and handling very wide data on the topic of speed. Then Aurora Tiffany Davis will take over and talk about publishing to jump live on the theme of collaboration. And then Julian Paris will talk about Workflow Builder on the theme of remembered and packaged. And along the way, we'll see JMP 17 features and some comments about the newly rewritten JMP Clinical. So first off, Joseph Morgan, developer in the DOE group and the reliability, the design of experiments and reliability group on the themes clear and concise and guided. Take it away, Joseph.
Thank you, John. Let me share my screen. Okay, so let me begin with the DOE workflow. Now, this is something that many of you are familiar with. After all, it's likely a part of the daily routine of some of you. If you're not familiar with it, it's in the JMP DOE guide. And it simply lays out the sequence of steps that one would follow if one were interested in conducting a designed experiment. So you can see that it begins on the left with a describe step, which is where you would identify your responses and factors, and then it would step through to the predict step on the right, which is where you would identify the optimal factor settings for your experiment. It turns out, though, that in practice, the DOE workflow is not quite as it appears in this image. In fact, it is more fragmented. It is fragmented in at least two sets of distinct steps. The design phase fragment, if you will, which is where you would identify the designer that you wanted to use. It may be the custom designer or the definitive screening designer, or one of the many other designers we offer in the DOE menu. And that's where you would describe your factors and responses, build your model, and construct your design. And along the way, you may be faced with a series of choices and options that may cause some anxiety or uncertainty. Then you would conduct your experiment, and you would move on to the analysis phase fragment, where you'd be faced with a similar situation where you decide on the fitter that you're going to use to fit your data. It may be the least squares personality or the generalized regression personality and fit model. You would fit your data, and then you would move on to the predict step, where perhaps you would use a profiler to determine your optimal factor settings. Now, it turns out that EasyDOE addresses that fragmented workload that you just saw. It encapsulates into one platform all of those steps, and it guides you seamlessly from step to step, from describe all the way to predict, and it embeds within the platform the designer that you need, the designers that you need, and it also embeds within the platform the fitters that you need. And so it eliminates those pain points that you experience as you try to conduct an experiment. But in addition to John's point of guidance, not only does it provide a guided mode for those of you who want minimal options, it recognizes that some of you want more flexibility. And so there are two usage modes that provide guidance: the fully guided mode, as we describe it, or the flexibly guided mode. And in addition, it provides a new file type in JMP 17, and this is to facilitate the collaboration that John spoke about. The file extension is a .jmp DOE file extension. And what that file type allows you to do is to save the state of EasyDOE at any point of time as you traverse through the steps of the workflow. And you may want to save where you are for collaboration, share it with your colleagues, and your colleagues may then want to pass it back to you so that you can continue your work. And it captures not just the state of your work, but every choice that you have made. And so EasyDOE exhibits the attributes of a workflow as John just described them: fluid, guided, it supports 2 usage modes, facilitates collaboration, and it is fast and it is concise. So let us then look at a demo of EasyDOE. So let me shift my screen here. And you would find EasyDOE under the DOE menu. It's the 3rd option, EasyDOE. And there are a few things about the user interface that I want to point out. First of all, notice that at the top of the dialog, there are radio buttons that allow you to determine what usage mode you are in. And by default, it's in guided mode. That's a fully guided mode. It's a tabbed report. Notice that there are tabs along the top of the dialog. Those align with the steps in the DOE workflow. It opens on the Define tab, which corresponds to the Describe step in the DOE workflow, and therefore it's not surprising that there's an outline node for you to specify responses and one for you to specify your factors. Let me draw your attention to the Choices panel here. This is where you would make choices about the type of the factor that you would be interested in adding to your factors table. And there are only 3 choices. So you can have a continuous factor, discrete numeric, or a categorical factor. And let me point out that we use plain language, right? Plain language simple language to describe what these factor types, or in DOE speak, factor roles are. And we even have a disclosure icon. Notice as I move the cursor, the disclosure icon becomes visible, that if you need additional guidance, it gives you an example. And so let us say you were interested in a categorical factor with 3 levels. You'd make those changes as I just did. And the Choices panel works in concert with the Add Factors button. So if I click Add Factors, there you go. Now, for the rest of this demo, I would like to use an example that some of you will recognize from the Optimal Design of Experiments text that Brad Jones and his colleague wrote a few years back. So I'll go to the red triangle menu. I'll go to Load Factors, and I load up the factors. This is a feature in every DOE platform. It simply loads factors from a data table where you had pre-specified factors. And for this experiment, a scientist at a biotechnology company is interested in extracting a compound from a solution. And so the scientist wants to maximize the yield of that extraction. And there are 3 solvents that the scientist can use. You can see them there. And the compound can be in solution for an hour or 2 hours. And so you can see that time is a factor. So with the factors specified, let's just move on to the Model tab. And what EasyDOE does is EasyDOE presents you with a choice of 4 model categories. And notice the disclosure icons for each of them. The disclosure icons present in simple language a description of what those categories are. And in addition, you will notice that the runs are associated with each category. EasyDOE has computed the runs given your factor specification. And so if you have a run budget, you can see if your run budget aligns with what the model categories suggest that your design size would be. Let us go with a main effects model and move to design. Immediately, EasyDOE constructs the design and presents it to you in a grid form. So let me just talk a little bit about what just happened there. It's fast. It constructed the design quickly. What EasyDOE did was it looked at the specification, it looked at the model that you chose, and it determined that the custom designer was the appropriate tool. So it invoked it, constructed it, and presented it to you. No choices at all necessary for the scientist here. Let us move on to the Data Entry tab. And you can see that the design is presented, but to its left is a panel where you can enter data. And so as you conduct your experiment, you could go ahead and enter data directly into the tool. Beneath the design are the factor plots. There is no data entered right now, so they are dot plots. And let me just point out that these dot plots are brushable as you would expect. But let us say that at this point, the scientist decides that he would like to save the state of EasyDOE to be shared with a colleague who's going to conduct the experiment, collect all the data, and then send it back to him. So what would the scientist do? Simply go to the file menu, choose save, specify the name. The scientist would have a jump.jump DOE file ready to be shipped off to his colleague. But I'm not going to save because I've done it already in the interest of time. And I'm actually going to dismiss the dialog. And you can imagine that the round trip has, yes, EasyDOE is reminding me to save. I don't want to save. The round trip has taken place. The scientist has received the file from his colleague. It's in his file system, so he can simply open. And notice here that there's a file called for plenary data entry. So that must be the file that I need. But let me just point out in the Finder window here under kind, you can see that it's marked as an EasyDOE file. So it's a correct file. Let me go ahead and open. And there you have EasyDOE reinstantiated at the point at which the scientist's colleague saved the data. The data is entered, factor plots are updated. You can begin to see the relationship between the responses and the factors, and it's ready for fitting. So let's go over to the Analyze tab. And it was fast. Immediately, the parameter estimates and the visualizations are presented. You can see the parameter estimates table with the estimate and the confidence bounds. And there's a little visualization here that shows the confidence intervals. And you can see a studentized residual plot and an actual by predicted plot. And you can see a root mean square error statistic. And so it's concise. But let me draw your attention to the best model button, right? Well, let us just click the button and see what happens. You notice that the term propanol, its confidence bar went from green to red. What happened there was EasyDOE invoked the stepwise platform, determined what the best terms were for the model, invoked the least squares platform to fit, computed the statistics, updated the report, and all very fast. And since propanol is not in the model, it is red, meaning not entered, and it is dotted as before. It turns out that the visualization with the confidence intervals is actually a control. Each of these bars is clickable. And they simply toggle the state of the term from being entered into the model to not being entered. So how about if we go ahead and we just click this term? Okay, notice what happened. It toggled the state and it is now entered into the model. All right, so some of you may be asking a question that I want to answer here very quickly before I continue. You may be wondering, well, how would things look if I were in flexible mode? And it's very easy to do. I simply go switch to usage mode, flexible, and notice that for those of you who are JUMP Pro users, that GenReg is what you see here. Yes, GenReg is embedded in EasyDOE. And you can see the solution path, you can see the parameter estimates, it's full featured. You can even see the model launch that allows you to specify estimation methods and validation method. So it's full featured. And if you're a JUMP standard user, we haven't forgotten you. What we have done is created a new fitter, JUMP, just for EasyDOE, for JUMP standard users. And it looks just like GenReg. It has a solution path, as you see here, it's laid out similarly. However, it doesn't have the model launch control, so it doesn't have all the features of GenReg, but it looks a lot similar to this. And then let me point out a button that we have added for convenience. It's the Update Guided Analysis button. And what that allows you to do is shear with guided mode the model that you've selected in GenReg. And the model here that you can see does not have propanol entered. So let's go ahead and shear and then switch and see what happens. Let's switch over to guided mode. And immediately you can see that in guided mode, the model that was sheared has been fit and the statistics updated. Now let us move to the Predict tab. Draw your attention to a button, the Optimize button here. And let me just click the button and you can see what happens. And immediately EasyDOE identified your optimal factor settings for the experiment you just conducted, and you're done. That's the end of the DOE workflow. But we have added one more tab. It's the Report tab. And what that does, it pulls everything together in one report, factor and response table, the design and the values that were collected during the experiment, the parameter estimates table, and all of the visualizations that you just saw. And so that is the end of the demo. Let me go back to presentation mode, and I should just point out that EasyDOE would not have been possible in the JUMP 17 timeframe without contributions of many people. And here they are. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Joseph. The next topic is navigated and fast. So let me switch screens here. Navigation concerns a new feature called Search Jump, implemented by Evan McCorkle. So here under the Help menu is Search Jump, and that is implemented by searching all the internal data structures, the same structures that generate our menus and indexes. So it automatically updates each new release as we add features and becomes part of the search. So let's search on a few terms. Let's load some data, and here's a model I fit. And the first thing I want to search for is equivalence tests. Okay, we know most statistics is about testing of something significantly different. Now we want to test the opposite, whether it's significantly the same, subject to a threshold. And so under Search Jump, I type in equivalence tests, and it already has found it. And in fact, equivalence tests are in many places in JUMP. And I want the one in fit least squares. There are actually two places under multiple comparisons, least squares means. Let's do multiple comparisons. So if I look at the multiple comparisons menu item and look for all pairwise comparisons, equivalence tests. And so now I can find that multiple comparisons, and here's all possible comparisons, equivalence tests. And now I have to enter a threshold. That is, what difference do we consider very minimal, so that we're testing whether it's within that difference. And so I'm going to enter 4 here. And here is the equivalence test. So these are two one-sided tests. So for each estimate, it shows the two one-sided confidence limits for that estimate. And if it's within the threshold of 4, which is in the blue range here, that difference is ruled to be equivalent. And so we see here there are 3 combinations for the 3 levels of drug, and the AD one is equivalent. It's very close to each other. The AF is not. The confidence, one of the confidence limits is greater than 4, and the same is true of the DF combination. And all the details are also in the text report. So equivalence tests is easy to find through JUMP Search. Let's look at some other kind of data. A lot of you in chemistry do spectral analysis, and it's all about finding peaks. So here's some NMR data, and I've heard that finding those peaks can be modeled well with wavelets. And so I'll do a search on wavelets. I can spell it right. And here I see, under specialized modeling, functional data explorer, I can find under models wavelets. In fact, let's go to that, and it launches Functional Data Explorer. And so I need to provide the ID variable, the output variables. Oh, sorry. My data is distributed across the rows, and so I need to enter it in a different way. I'm going to add some supplementary variables that have to do with the mixture that I'm getting the spectra of. And so now I'm ready to analyze it. And this being spectral data, I noticed that there's a command or a tab for transformations, and I can smooth it with the Savitsky-Golay. And so let's filter that data. It smooths it out a little bit and improves the estimation process. And now I can go under models and wavelets, and now it's fit all the wavelets. It actually has tried 15 different wavelet basis function sets, and it's found the best one with the Bayesian information criterion is the Quiflet 5. And so here you see are the shape functions. You used to call them eigenfunctions here that it's built up the model from. And then I see here the score plot, the functional principal components, and I can look at each compound and what its signature looks like. And I can look at the profiler, and I have also specified these auxiliary variables, and I can do a functional DOE analysis on those. And now I can see that as I change the ingredients, if I make it mostly pentanol, it really raises that second peak there dramatically. And as I go through and change the mixture, you can see how the characteristic peaks change according to this wavelet model. So wavelets. In the drug industry, often they need to do a dissolution curve analysis. That is, how fast a tablet dissolves. And you need to analyze it and compare it with the reference samples. So here I have some dissolution data. So after a given number of minutes, how much of it got dissolved. And I do that for several reference samples and test samples. And I want to see if they're basically equivalent. And I've heard that the F2 analysis is good for that. And so I can go to Search Jump and look for F2. And now I see under specialized modeling, FitCurve can do dissolution curve analysis. And under that, I see model-free comparisons, F2 analysis. And I can directly go there, and it launches the platform. And here I have the stack data format, and I'll group the batch as my group, time is my X, dissolved is my response. And now I have FitCurve, and it's told me to go to dissolution model free comparisons, the F2 analysis. And now I have to verify that my reference sample is called reference, and I can set several other things. Tablet identifies each unit. And now here are the dissolution curves with the reference in blue and the test in red. And you can see by the graph that they're fairly different. The reference one dissolves a lot faster, but the test one actually dissolves further after a given number of minutes. And it's judged by the F2 analysis. The F2 is 42, which is under 50. So the conclusion is that they are not similar. And so that, along with many other dissolution curve features, ought to give lots of functionality to those needing to do dissolution analysis. Okay. Again, in the drug industry, there's an initiative called Quality by Design. And this is not chemistry data, but basically it's all about operating limits or specification limits, whatever you want to call them. How can I set intervals such that it guarantees that all the responses obey the constraints that I need on them, the critical quality attributes. And so I search under search JMP design space. So this is the concept under QBD, and it says under the profiler, there's a design space profiler that I can use, and so I'll look for that. And here we see design space profiler. Now, the object of design space, well, the ordinary profiler, see, I have the spec limits already here, and I can see if any given set point will fall within the spec limits. But what I need to do is set up intervals such as if anything is within that interval, then it will produce good responses that satisfy the spec limits on the responses. And so the design space profiler is the way to do that. And it starts out with giving the whole factor space, and given the whole factor space, only about 16% of that space maps to compliant responses. But if I narrow the ranges in the factor space and to something closer to set points that give good results, then I can dramatically improve it. And now it's gone from 16% to 47%. In fact, there's buttons to move inward, and it'll move in the fastest direction. And eventually I can get to a set of factor limits that that map most of this limited space into acceptable responses. So now we're up to 96%. Here's 97.3%. And now this is just mapping the amount of space in the limited factor space into the response space. Then I can further refine that by going into the simulator. And let's use those limits as 3 sigma limits and simulation. And now I see that my defect rate is only about 0.6%. And so I'm producing pretty good product with those spec limits. So design space. Now, there's many other features in JMP that are new to 17. There's new data connectors. There's a big initiative on many data connectors. There's generalized linear models, linear mixed models where you can have random effects and yet the responses be Poisson or binomial. The profiler has other new features such as Shapley values. There's a design explorer that allows you to compare many different designs and try out different numbers of runs. There's many new highlights in the quality environment. Process screening has much more complete control chart features, and measurement systems analysis has new features. In reliability, the repeated measures degradation platform has a lot of new features that involve Bayesian modeling. And in genetics, we retired JMP genetics, but now there are features in JMP Pro that do all the things that used to be done by JMP genetics and much faster, as you'll see soon. So that's navigated workflow. Now let's shift topics to speed. Okay, how do you speed up the analysis? Well, genetics, as we mentioned, is a particular problem because there's tons of data. In fact, usually it's represented by tens or hundreds of thousands of columns. And here's an example. This is the Maze data. And this is actually only one chromosome in the Maze data. And there's quite a few rows of 6,200, but there's even a lot more columns. So I have 135,608 genes, and subject to those gene markers, I want to find out which gene markers tend to relate or predict traits, and I recorded 3 traits here. And so I want to do all 3 traits by all these gene markers. That's 406,000 regressions on 6,200 rows. So, but we have, 40 minutes left in this presentation, so we can wait for that, right? So let's go to response screening. And those traits are the Ys and the 135,000 X's and the genes. And we're going to tell it we can plot it on the same scale. And so now we start it. Now we have to wait. 1, 2, 3. Okay, not bad. So under the theme of speed, we can look at lots of relationships, and it only takes a few seconds. So here's 406,000 tests here. Among all those tests, we, of course, we don't believe the test is significant because with selection bias, if we just pick out the most significant by just sorting them, it may be significant by accident. So we need some kind of adjustment for that. And the way to do that is with the false discovery rate adjustment, where we use the Benjamini-Hochberg approach. And about 44% of them are significant at 0.05 with the false discovery rate adjustment. About 34% of them are significant at 0.01. And that's where these curves cross the lines. And now we can look at the summary of the significance by the slope. The significance is represented on the log scale. This is the minus the base 10 log of the p-value. And here we see that a report is sorted, and these markers tend to be the most associated with certain traits, in this case, trait 1. And we have 406,000 more to look through, but you get the idea. So this is called a volcano plot, which is any plot of the log worth by slope or a mean difference. And it tends to look like this. Okay. Now, there's many other ways that we're adapting to these very wide genomics kind of problems. We just saw response screening with volcano plots. There's also fit response screening when you can have many different responses that you fit to the same model, or to switching many different regressors in. Fit logistic and fit mix can also have new features for supporting many Ys, like tens of thousands of them. Digesting them into data sets instead of a huge number of reports. Hierarchical clustering has a new method for handling very wide big data called hybrid ward, which I talked about in last year's keynote. Principal components has new features for handling this very wide data, one called randomized SVD. There's various bottlenecks that we fixed to make things much improved for wide data. And there's a new genetics menu that has marker statistics and other features. Also, there's better accommodation for very wide data with Explorer outliers. And many of the features throughout the modeling have this false discovery rate adjustment. So there you have the search, navigation, and the speed, especially relevant in genomics. And so now it's time for Aurora Tiffany Davis, who is a JMP Live developer in the hosting and interface group on the subject of collaborative. So take it away, Aurora.
Thank you, John. All right, I'd like to start by zooming back out to take another look at the JMP analytic workflow that you saw earlier. Once you've accessed your data and used some of JMP's analytic capabilities to produce insights, what's the natural next step? You'll want to share those insights with other people. JMP Live is a secure platform for sharing JMP content with your colleagues, whether or not they use JMP themselves. And what that means is that you can invite any of your colleagues to join in your analysis with you. Of course, JMP Live does offer deeper collaboration options for those colleagues who do use JMP. So how do you share your insights using JMP Live? That's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm just going to hit the highlights of publishing to JMP Live, finding things on JMP Live, collaborating, and finally keeping your reports and your data up to date. Let's get started. I have here a data table that I find really interesting because I'm a JMP Live software developer, and this data is all about JMP Live. Specifically, this is data on how me and my colleagues have been using a Jump Live site that we have set up here at the office. Now let's say that this data is all I have. I haven't done any analysis on it, so I don't have any reports to share. But I do want to get this data into the hands of my colleagues. I'm hoping that maybe one of them will be able to make use of it. So I can go to File, Publish, and I can publish data to Jump Live all by itself. Of course, if I do have reports, I'll have more options. So let's take a look at that. I have here a really simple report called Jump Live Events by Post Type. Jump Live can host not only your reports, but also the data that those reports rely upon. And we can see here that me and my colleagues have been viewing Jump Live posts far more often than we've been doing anything else with them. We've been viewing reports more often than we've been viewing data. But when it comes to downloads, it's the other way around. We've been downloading data a little bit more often. Okay, I have one other simple report here called Most Active Jump Live Users, and it's just what it sounds like. Those users on our internal site that have been more active are represented by larger rectangles here. Okay, these are simple analyses, but I want to share them with my colleagues. So this time I'll go to File, Publish, and I will select Publish Reports to Jump Live. Now, the first decision that I'll need to make is, among those reports that are currently open in Jump, which ones do I want to publish to my organization's Jump Live site? And I would like both of them. Okay, and the next decision I'll need to make is, where do I want to put them? Well, I see here that my organization has a space called Discovery Americas 2022. That certainly seems like a reasonable place to publish these reports. And within that space, I see that there's a folder called Jump Live in the Analytic Workflow. Perfect. Within that folder, I think I'd like to tuck these inside of another folder called Jump Live Usage, because that is what these reports are all about. Gosh, I can't type. There we go. Next, I think I want this report to come first, so I'll just drag and drop and click Publish. Okay, so this page just confirms for me that I have published to a folder called Jump Live Usage 2 new reports, as well as the data that those reports rely upon. When it comes to publishing your reports, we try to keep you in the flow by walking you through the process with this wizard. And now that we have set up a publish the way that we like it, doing it again should be easy. For example, you could see that when I first got started, it had an idea of what space and what folder I might want. And that's because that's the space and folder that I had published to previously. Now, if you want to do a publish similar to this one again in the future, and you want to do that in a script, you can use this feature here called Save Publish Script to Script Window. What that will do is generate for you a script which expresses in JSL the decisions that you made while you were walking through this publish wizard. Okay, so now I've published, and if I want to find those reports that I just published to Jump Live, it's really easy for me. I can just follow one of these 2 links on my successfully published page, but that's not really what Jump Live is about. We want other people to find my content. So let's switch over to Jump Live and take a look at that. Let's say that I'm browsing around on my organization's Jump Live site. I'm browsing around on the home page. Now I can see these newly published reports pretty near the top, because the newly published content is going to bubble up to the top. There's only a few things that were published more recently than these. So that's a good way to find newly published content if you're just browsing around and you're not exactly sure what you want. There are also filters on this homepage if you want those. But if you do have some idea of what you might want, you have a few more options for finding things. So let's say that you know that the Discovery Americas 2022 conference is going on right now, and your organization has set up a space for content related to that conference. You can go into that space and browse around and find the content that way. Or maybe you know that someone out there has been doing some analysis on Jump Live usage. Well, you can search more directly for that content by coming up here to the search pane and typing in usage, and you can find the content that way. Or maybe you know that there's a particular user who often publishes things that you find interesting. You can search for that user. You can find their profile page, and you can find the content that way. And here again, this is an example of a Jump Live area where newly published content is going to bubble up to the top. We think that finding what you need should be easy, so we try to offer you a path from whatever you may know to the content that you're going to find the most interesting. Okay, so now you've found some reports. Let's say I'm looking at this one, most active Jump Live users. But I've noticed that some of these usernames look a little bit weird to me. I don't think I have a colleague whose name is JavaScript. And I'm pretty sure I also don't have a colleague whose name is user350. I suspect that these accounts, maybe they're accounts used for scripting or something like that. That's really not what I'm interested in. So I'm going to select those and choose to exclude and hide selected rows. There we go, that's better. Now I'm looking at a report of the most active Jump Live users among those living, breathing humans, that I share an office with. That's what I wanted to see. That's just one really simple example of interacting with a Jump Live report. It's simple, but it's also powerful because what I just did was I commanded the Jump Live server to rerun this analysis as though those users did not exist. And this is an example of what I mean when I say that you can invite your colleagues to take part in the analysis with you. But interacting with the Jump Live report is just one of the collaboration modes that Jump Live supports. Another common collaboration mode is downloading each other's content. So from this report, I could go to the menu and select download. Or I could find the data that this report relies upon by opening up the details pane and scrolling down to the data area. I can then click this link, which will take me to the data post. And I can see here on the data post that this data supports not only the report we looked at just a moment ago, but another report as well. If I want to get a look at this data and do more analysis with it, again, I can go to menu and download. Or from a folder, which might contain many reports and many data tables. Again, I can go to menu and download. Now, if you have a connection set up between Jump on your machine and your organization's Jump Live site, you can use a shortcut called Open in Jump. And this shortcut is available to you in all of the scenarios that we just went through, whether that be a report, a data post, or a folder. So here I'm going to click this shortcut Open in Jump on a folder. And when I confirm that I want to open it, what I get is a self-contained Jump project open on my machine, which contains all of the content that was in that Jump Live folder. So in our case, that's 2 reports, as well as the data that those reports rely upon. We think that a smooth workflow should enable and encourage collaboration. And of course, collaboration is what Jump Live is all about. Now, what that collaboration looks like is going to differ depending on what you and your colleagues actually want to do, right? So maybe your colleague just wants to see your analysis on Jump Live. That's fine. But maybe they also want to interact with it. Maybe they want to download it. Maybe they want to download the data that it depends upon. Maybe they want to download a whole collection of Jump content. Maybe they want to download your data, create a new report analyzing that data, and publish that back to Jump Live to get this analysis cycle going. Jump Live supports all those modes of collaboration. Okay, so let's say that you and your colleagues have been working together for a while, and you have this great body of data and a bunch of great analyses, reports based on these data. But what happens when you get new data? Let's take a look back on Jump Live. And let's go back to that data post that we looked at just a moment ago. If you have a new Jump data table file, you can simply upload that data table file directly to Jump Live by using this blue Update Data button. And when you do, all of the reports that rely on that data will automatically regenerate to reflect the latest information. Or if you prefer, you can update your data by using a refresh script. A refresh script is any JSL that spits out a data table at the end. If your data table has a source script, good news, you already have JSL that spits out a data table at the end. Now, my data table does have a source script, and the reason is I got my data from a database and I used the Jump feature Query Builder to get it. And Query Builder, when it constructed a data table for me, it thoughtfully tucked that source script in there for me. Now, my source script is fairly simple. It creates a connection to the database, goes out and gets some data. That's exactly what I would want to do if I wanted to go back out to the data and get the latest information. So this is going to be really easy for me. I'm just going to copy from the source script and paste into the refresh script. Then I'm going to flip this switch to say this data is now refreshable. There's one other thing that you might need. You might need credentials. In my case, I do need credentials because my data comes from a database that requires a password. So I have my credentials securely stored in JMP Live, and I'll just assign them to this data post. Okay, that's it. That's all I need. Now, whenever I want, I can click this refresh data button. And when I confirm, what will happen is my refresh script will run, it'll go out to my database, and it will pull into JMP Live all the latest information. And when that happens, all of the reports that rely on that data will automatically regenerate to reflect the latest information. Sounds good, but I actually want to take this one step further because I'm very forgetful. I don't want to have to remember to come in here and click refresh data all the time. I want this to refresh for me on a schedule. So I'm going to set up a refresh schedule. I think I would like my data to refresh every half an hour every day. Maybe just every business day. Okay, there we go. Now, every 30 minutes, 5 days per week, my refresh script will run, go out to my database, pull in the information to JMP Live, and my reports will regenerate. So when it comes to keeping your data up to date, we try to keep you in the flow by supporting you in whichever way you're most comfortable working. So if you're most comfortable working directly with data table files, you can upload them directly to JMP Live with a simple button. But if you are comfortable going out and getting your data from an external source using JSL that you've written yourself or JSL that's based on something JMP provided to you with features such as Query Builder, you can do that as well. And when it comes to setting up a refresh schedule, we try to keep you in the flow by making sure that you don't have to detour out to some other tool. For example, your operating system's task scheduler. Instead, we let you do that directly within JMP Live. Okay, so with JMP Live, we hope to make the sharing of your insights easy, powerful, collaborative, and reproducible. And we think that JMP Live is a natural fit for the JMP analytic workflow. And with that, I'll pass it back to John.
Thank you, Aurora. Next, workflow guided by a standard. Sometimes your data is packaged in a standard way, regulated by a standard setting organization. When this is true, then there are opportunities to package standard workflows. So clinical drug data submitted for approval by the FDA is mandated to be in the CDISC format. And of course, JMP Clinical has been implemented. The process has implemented the processes to make analyzing this data easy. It's been out for several years. However, JMP Clinical was due for an engineering upgrade. JMP Clinical in the past required a SaaS backend to do the work. And this made it a burden to install. It also slowed the analytics because it was sending data to disk and back all the time. And it also limited it to Windows. But now, JMP Clinical for 17 no longer needs SaaS. Everything it needs is already in JMP. And because of that, it's much easier to install, much faster, much more flexible with data filters, works on Macs as well as Windows, and interactive reports can be published to JMP Live. So simplicity and speed are the themes with the new JMP Clinical coming in November. So our next presenter is Julian Paris, who's the Director of Digital Marketing or User Acquisition, working closely with Ernest Pasower in development, and he will cover the themes remembered and packaged. Take it away, Julian.
Thanks so much, John. Hey, everyone. So I want to start with this question. What does it take for a workflow to be remembered? Now, of course, that's going to depend largely on what you're trying to do in that workflow, how complicated it is, how many steps you have. Now, Jump is an incredibly flexible tool, as most of you know. So that means many of our workflows can be several dozen, maybe even several hundred steps. And so it's no easy endeavor to remember a workflow. Now, what it takes is going to depend on how you approach that problem in Jump, specifically to click or to code, to use Jump interactively, or to write the script for that workflow. Now, of course, each of these modes of using Jump come with particular affordances, particular things they enable, but they also come with different costs. So let's dig into that for a second. On the side of clicking, using Jump interactively, of course, this is how Jump is built. It's built to be easy to use this way. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Jump is the most powerful but easy to use mouse-driven software for data in the world. So of course, if you can carry off your workflow by clicking, that's going to be the simplest way to do it. Now, in part because it's so easy, Jump also, when you're using it interactively, allows you to be agile, to see something new, to move in a different direction, to make discoveries. Again, that's part of Jump's DNA, to give you the ability to see something and get an answer right away. The margin between asking the question and getting the answer is usually just a click or two, and maybe even only a few seconds. So again, that's another score on the side of click. Now, partially because it's easy, partially because it keeps you agile, it's also just very fast to click, which means as long as you're doing something one time, or maybe even a few times, it's actually the most efficient thing to do. Clicking is going to be so fast that you can probably have something you need to do every few months, and it still is probably faster just to click your way through it than to invest the time to write the code. Because I think we all know there's a time investment on the other side, not just in the skills you have to develop in order to do it, but also in the process of actually generating the code for a particular workflow. Now, on the side of code, of course, the pure benefit of it is efficiency to reproduce. Once you have invested that time, you can just click the run button and your workflow will execute as fast as Jump can. So for tasks that you're repeatedly doing, of course, it makes sense to invest the time to build that code. Code is also transferable. I'm going to say this in two ways. Transferable first to other people. I can do the work to write the code and I can pass it off to a colleague who doesn't much have to understand what I'm doing, but can simply hit the run button and carry off that workflow on their own. Now, code is also transferable to other situations. This is in part by design. We can make adjustments to the code based on a new context, or if we really want to invest the time, we can write generalizable code from the start that can really port itself to many different contexts. So transferability is certainly a point in the favor of the code column. Now, finally, and you might want to argue with me on this, but I think code is very efficient to communicate your workflow. As long as somebody knows how to read JSL, even at a simple level, they can see exactly what you've done in the software. So it's a very efficient way to communicate what you've done, because in essence, once you've invested the time to make the code, you've now also invested the time to make the communication of your workflow. So clicking and coding come with different affordances. And of course, this question in Jump, we've always had sort of an architectural answer built which is in Jump, you can click in order to generate code for the analysis that you've just done. And that architectural choice has been built into Jump since scripting was first available in Jump 4. Here on the serials dataset, if I produce a distribution analysis, once the report comes up, that top red triangle had that new section for save script. Or script it was at that time, where I can save a script to a script window, to the data table, really to anywhere I want, such that I can take the script that Jump has now generated for me that represents my interactive action, and I could store it and cobble it together with other bits of script based on the workflow I'm running. So that's been built into the architecture for quite a long time, and we've continued to improve the process of clicking to get code all the way to Jump 16, our last release, where I think we've kind of reached the pinnacle of this with action recording. So your same interactive actions here again in the serials data table, getting a distribution output, we don't even have to go to the red triangle. The enhanced log was silently getting the recipient actions from the action recorder. So now most of the actions you took in Jump interactively were just being dropped into the log, slightly simplifying the process of capturing them all, but certainly giving you the list so that you can again cobble them together to make your workflow script. So Jump really has been making it easier, but I think if we're really honest with ourselves, it still hasn't been easy. Again, Jump is incredibly flexible. Our workflows can contain dozens or hundreds of steps. So cobbling together all those pieces into a script window still requires some core code concepts that we know them. We can very easily mess up code with just a semicolon missing or misplaced, a parenthesis not closed. To a non-scripter, to a non-coder, this can be an intimidating barrier to entry. So what if we didn't have to cobble? Truly, what if code could really be as easy as click, with all the affordances of click that we already discussed, but also with all the affordances of code? What if instead of cobbling, we could compose? So that's where I'm excited to show you today, Workflow Builder in JMP 17, which is our answer to that question. So let's take a look. Now I'm going to start by opening a completed JMP flow file. This is the new file type in JMP 17 to represent a workflow. And so this is a context where potentially I have a weekly billing that I need to do that requires some cleanup on a data table and then some graphs and reports. So let me open the billing. And here's a workflow builder window. I have this set in presentation mode, which I'll talk about in a second. So we have some simplified controls at the top, and I'm just going to click the play button and let's observe what happens. It looks like JMP ran through these individual lines, those are steps in the workflow, and produced a bunch of output and even made some alterations to the table. Let's just restart the workflow, clears our workspace, and I'm going to go through it one by one just so we can really see what's happening. Click forward, import file happened. The next option changed the tip percentage column. I'll actually, let's actually restart it. I want you to see that in real time. I'll hit forward again, scroll over here. Tip percentage didn't have a formula, so I'll hit forward. That populated the formula. It looks like we changed the formatting for it. We're going to recode the server column with some names. We're going to recode the credit card column. Okay. Totals by card is going to be a tabulation. I'll step forward for that. Step forward for another tabulation. So we have server names nested inside a day of week. And finally, we have a graph. So literally reflecting the individual steps of my workflow, but now in a graphical environment. And so already running is even simplified relative to a script window. But of course, you might say, Julian, the hardest part was always the building of the code. Running it was really never an impediment. We can teach people how to press Control-R on their keyboards. So let's see what it takes to build this. And are we really living up to coding as easy as clicking? So I'm going to make a new workflow. File, new workflow. The workflow blank document comes up. We have a couple ways we could build this. We could actually go back through our log of actions and move them into the workflow as steps. So we can populate from past actions if we like. But I'm going to do this in real time with you. I'm going to click the record button and let Workflow Builder capture those actions, those steps as I take them. So let's do it. I'm going to do this rather quickly. Mostly I want to show you Workflow Builder. So I'm going to open up Restaurant Week 1. That CSV opens. We're going to first do the tip percentage column, right click and go to formula. Tip percentage is just tip amount divided by bill amount. I'll click OK. We're going to make this have some formatting we want. So we'll go to column info and set this to percent. There's percent there. Our servers, we're going to recode those names. Perhaps we don't want A, B, and C. So I'll go to recode. And let's say it's Albert, let's say Bob, and Carol. And I'm going to do this recoding in place, just right over those values. I don't need the old values. Now I'm going to pause for a second, because notice what's happening on the left is that Workflow Builder has individual steps for each of my interactive actions. And so if we want to confirm that we get back to where we started, or where we ended, I should say, which is always a good coding practice, I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to hit restart, clear my workspace, and hit play. And let's confirm that all the actions were captured and I'm right back where I started. Perfect. Let's keep going. I'll hit record again, and let's process that credit card column. So I'll go back to recode. I think I called it card use, so I wanted to make a new column. And if you didn't use a card, that means you use cash. And if you did, that means you use a credit card. So a little bit more informative there. I'll hit recode. Now we're going to make those tabulations. So analyze, tabulate. The first tabulation I did was based on, I believe it was server. So I'll put server here as my drop zone for rows. I wanted the bill amount and tip amount for each of those servers. I also wanted the mean. I'll drop that to the right of mean. I'm going to pack these columns together. I'll select them and pack. It's just a nice layout where it's the sum with the mean inside of it. I'll hit done. Now I want you to observe something. Workflow Builder hasn't captured this step yet. And it hasn't captured it for a reason. It is waiting for me to assert that I'm done with this window, because I can make all sorts of changes. Easy way to do that, just close the window. and Workflow Builder knows you're done with it and writes it to the steps. Let's do the other tabulation. So again, tabulate. This time we had day of week on my drop zone for rows. We also had servers nested inside of them. I'll take again the bill amount to tip amount. Let's stick them up here. I'll take the mean, nest it, and let's pack those columns again. Hit done, close the window. There we go. Finally, the graph. So graph builder, in this case, we had bill amount, we had day of week, we had bars. We stuck the tip amount on the inside there because I wanted to bullet, and then we're done. Again, graph builder is waiting for me to assert, or workflow builder, I should say, it's waiting for me to assert that I'm done, because I could change anything from sizing to whatever. I'll close it, and now we're done. Let's confirm it worked. I'll hit stop recording, restart, hit play, and there we go. Our workflow captured as easy as clicking, but now with all the affordances of a code environment. I'll hit restart because I want to walk you through a couple other things in this before we look at a different example. Now, I showed you originally that I had it set in presentation mode, which is a nice mode to set under the red triangle if you want to pass this off to a colleague, because now it takes away the recording and some of the other options, just makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to turn that back on. Now, once we're in the environment, an obvious question might be, well, what if I messed up a step? What if I did that recoding of the server names wrong? Like, oh gosh, it's not Carol, it's Carly. Well, I want to show you two ways of handling that. The first way, of course, if you know how to code, I'm just going to double click on that step. All the step code is there. You could go in and make the adjustment if you know how to work with that. But I'm going to minimize that section because let's just say you don't want to look at that code. Instead, you just want to re-record that step. To do that, you want Workflow Builder to get you to the right place to re-record that step and then substitute in the JSL. So let's do that. I'll right-click on server and I'll say, I want to re-record this step. Workflow Builder is going to run up to that place and it's waiting for me to finish the re-recording. So I'll go to server column here. We had Albert, we had Bob, and I'll get it right this time, Carly, in place, hit recode, tell Workflow Builder I'm done, and now it's replaced that. So now if I restart and replay, it actually is, Carly and not Carol. Just to confirm, there we go, Carly. So lots of great options in there, but that's basically it. You've learned all you need to know to make your own workflows. So from here on out, I want to take you through additional examples of how you can utilize this basic structure to really use your clicking or interactive use of JMP to build these kinds of workflows. And so let's try a slightly more difficult example, I'll say, where we're working with multiple tables. And so this example, I'll just open it and play it for you first. You're going to see it do a lot of things, but primarily its job is to create a CSV. I'll hit play and it's going to go through and merge some tables, process some data, and it's going to make me this rentals by genre CSV, which presumably, let's say I produce on a weekly basis, or maybe even an annual basis, some amount of time where I don't want to either remember these steps or go through the process of doing it manually. And so just so you can see what it's done, let me go back to the start. I'm going to add some breakpoints. Breakpoints like they are in programming, just stop the execution of the code when you're actually running it. And so I'll set these here. So I'm going to hit play. It's going to get us to the first table. These are the rental data that are in the sample data in JMP. The first kind of group of steps here is going to add customer data. So if I hit play, it actually goes out, gets the other table, and merges it into this one. So using tables update. We also want to add inventory data, data that reflects what these rentals are. We only have an item number, and we want to know what the movies are. So I'll hit play. It's going to process that group. So now we have information about their genre, which we're eventually going to need for that final table. We're going to format some dates. I don't have a month column in here. I know the date, but I don't have it written out. So I'll hit play and let that create the month column for me. We're going to make a summary table. And this is a stepping stone to our final save. So I've made the summary table here. We're going to save that text file. And I'll just move this out of the way so you can see. It's going to save that to my desktop. And then finally, I actually have the close actions recorded in this workflow. So it cleans up my environment. So that's the workflow. Again, let's see what it takes to build this just doing the clicking actions. So again, file, new workflow. I'm going to again click the record button. And again, I'm going to do this rather quickly because the whole point here is for you to see just how fast this is. So the first thing I actually did was using multiple file import. So I did open multiple. And I'm going to point it at a location here, which is called current data. And so current data is a folder on my computer where I've put a folder called 2006, which has 52 CSVs in it. And so this current data folder is going to be the place I'm going to keep adding new data to. So I pointed it at that folder. I'm going to say include subfolders, and then I'll just click import. And JMP knows enough to know how to stack or concatenate those tables together. So here are my 52 weeks of data from 2006. Now remember, we had to do a number of operations here. We first wanted to bring in some customer data. And so I'm going to open that customer data. I'm going to go to my rentals folder, open customers, and here are the customer data. And the way these are linked, which you may know if you've ever used a join in JMP, is we're linking on the basis of some value so that we know which row corresponds to which row. So customer ID mapping to customer ID here. And so the way we're going to do this is I'll use tables update, which is a smaller kind of sibling of join. And I'm going to tell JMP that I want to update our main table with customers data. And I'm also going to turn on this preview on the right-hand side, which is also new in JMP 17. So we can see what the update will look like before I commit to it. And so I'll say customer ID is linked with customer ID. I'll click match. Already it shows me a preview of the table, and that looks perfect. So I'll just click OK. And now I'll close the customers file because we don't need it because our final table actually has all those data in it. Okay, let's do the next one. I want to process the inventory data. I want to bring those in. Go back to my main table, tables update. Again, I'm going to say that inventory is the table I want to link to. Item number now matches with item number. And I'll toggle on the preview just to confirm. Looks great. It's bringing in the genre, the movie name, all of that information. Perfect. Hit OK, close the inventory. Okay, we're nearly there. We want to make that date column that actually represents the months. So I'll right click on my date column, go to new formula column, date time. Month abbreviated is what will give me the text version of the month. Now we want to actually make the summary table. So tables, summary. Again, we have that preview, which is going to be really helpful because we can see what these different zones do for us. Now, if you remember, we want a genre reflected across the columns. And so I'll take genre here, and that's subgroup. You can see already it gives me a preview. So if I got it wrong, I can move it. Next, we want as the grouping, the row variable, we want that to be month. So there's my month. Okay. Now we currently have the number of movies represented within each of those different genre by month combinations. The one thing my final table had before was actually the proportion of the families who have children. And so we have this kids under 12 column, which is a 0 or a 1. So we could just take the mean of that. And the mean of a 1 and 0 column is effectively the proportion of that column that equals 1. So there we go. I'll do a couple things here. I'll call this rentals by genre. There we go. And I'll click OK. Now we have that table, our summary table. The only thing I didn't show before that we want to do is we want to make these proportions. So I'll select them all, right click, standardize attributes, and I'll say we want to standardize a format, and I want a format to be percentage. And so that broadcasts the standardization across all those columns. Final thing we want to do is export it. I'm going to get rid of the old one because I want to export this out to my desktop. File, export. We'll say it's a text file. I want to put that on my desktop, and I want it to have a CSV extension. Export. Finally, now we're just going to clean up our workspace here. I'll close that file. We don't need it. Close that file. We don't need it. Stop recording, and we're done. So nothing was making it slower for me to capture the workflow than just doing the normal clicking actions. So I'll hit play again just to confirm. But as before, JMP has captured everything we've done with no additional overhead. Now, the fact that there's no additional overhead for me changes the game because I often have workflows. I often have work that I'm doing. I wouldn't even call them workflows, but pieces of what I'm doing are just basically the same every day. So I'll give you an example. I work with this page hits current file. The way this is built is actually pulling down some BigQuery data, pulling our website traffic. And this is a huge file. This is going to be only the website hits that we've had since January 1st. And it's something like 10.7 million to our website. Now, this file has nothing terribly wrong with it, just it needs some cleanup. There are columns that I don't always want to see. Certain columns I do want to see are stuck in the middle of places. So I have to spend maybe 2 minutes cleaning this up to get it right to where I want to for an analysis. So I just capture that one time. There it is, cleanup for the page hits table. I just hit play once I open that page hits table. And it's not doing anything that special, but because there was no overhead in building this, my daily burdensome work that's only 2 minutes long, I now was able to automate away. And those 2 minutes, if you're working on something every day, will ultimately add up. So the change to the investment of time changes the calculus around what you will script and what you're going to, tolerate when you do this work. I don't think I need to show you this one. It's just deleting some columns, but you can probably trust me at this point. The development of this workflow was no harder than just doing those actions in JMP. And it gets you to a place where now I go off and do whatever I need to do for the day in that workflow. All right, so we've seen some things already. Workflow Builder is the place to record your workflows in JMP without having to do any bit of coding unless you want to. Of course, it's still there, but you never have to see it if you don't need it. It's also the right place to replay. If you're sending somebody some actions to run, better to send a workflow in presentation mode that lets them see the individual steps than sending them a script. It also means they can tell you exactly where something might fail. Those green check marks there on the right aren't just for show. It helps you track down what was going on if something doesn't work. It's also the right place to document your work. Of course, for regulatory environments, you would love to have a complete history of the actions you've taken on a particular data table. This is the right way to do it. And finally, it's the right way to demonstrate work you've done in JMP. If you come into a meeting and you want to walk people through a process, using the forward button and walking them through just what you've done is much more interpretable than doing it within a script window where you're executing scripts piecemeal. So recording, replaying, documenting, and demonstrating, Workflow Builder is the right tool. But there's one more thing it does that I think changes really the scope of what you can do with it, which is Workflow Builder is the right place to generalize your work. That is to take what you've recorded in context and execute it in concept. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So I'm going to bring back the restaurants data. Remember, I called it restaurants weekly. So that might have given you a clue that this is something we do multiple times in different weeks. So when we ran this, and just to remind you, it opens a file, does some graphs, does some tabulations. This is, of course, all working on that restaurant weeks 1 CSV. And so I want to do something here. I want you to imagine what happens if I disable this step and try to have Workflow Builder run on restaurant week 2. Well, first, let's actually look at the JSL equivalent. So I'm going to tell Workflow Builder to create a script out of this workflow. So it's going to build this for me based on the steps. And if you've looked at JSL before, you may already notice there's a lot of places that are represented by a table reference. So if I pull up in restaurant week 2 and try to run this script, it's not going to work. It says you cannot locate this data table. It doesn't know where restaurant week 1 is. I've given it restaurant week 2, but for me to get this script to work on it, I have to go through and make a lot of adjustments, don't I? So what's Workflow Builder going to do? So Workflow Builder, again, built on restaurant week 1. Let's hit play and see if it fails. Well, it doesn't fail, but it does give us a prompt. It says restaurant week 1 does not appear to be available. Open this table or select a different table. Okay, so it's showing some resiliency here. I'll select restaurant week 2 and hit OK, and everything works. All those consecutive actions that all also pointed to restaurant week 1, right? They're now working on restaurant week 2. Let's just replay that again and just see it. It says you need a table open. So actually, let me open that table again, restaurant week 2. And I'll just hit play and we'll see it merrily goes along. In fact, it even remembered that I had done that substitution before, which I'll show a little bit more later, but under references, there's this replacements option, and it keeps track of the replacements you did to the references in your table. And so this is actually pretty compelling. These references now to different table names are resilient to changes. Let's open a slightly harder problem. So restaurant week 3, again, a different name. But notice something, bills and tips were not the name of those columns when I built this. Bill amount and tip amount were the column names. I'll hit play and let's see what happens. Again, it prompts me, it says restaurant week 2 isn't available. So let's point it at restaurant week 3. It's going to encounter that column reference to bill amount and it says, I can't find bill amount. Something else work you want to pick? I'll pick bills. It's going to encounter tip amount. I'll say tips is just fine for that. Everything runs just fine. The concept of what you recorded now is essentially your workflow, not the exact context, because of the resilient references and the way Workflow Builder is working to execute them. Your workflows can work in different environments they weren't originally built for. And so let's look at some of our other examples. So in the rentals file, I'll open that open again. You might have thought I cheated a little bit and got around a problem of table name changes by using import multiple files, because that ultimately is looking at an entire folder of data. So let's see what happens. This is a harder problem. I'm going to pull in, let's say 2007, 8, and 9. I'll just stick those in that same current data folder. And so it's a decent amount of file. That's 52 times 3 additional files that are being added in there. And so now let's run this workflow. It's going to point to that current data folder. And it says, hey, wait a minute, something is different here. I'm looking for 2006 week 1 through week 52. And all I see is customers, which is already open, 2006 week 1 versus 2009 week 53. Well, that's a perfectly fine substitution. I'll just hit that, let it run. Everything is just fine. And I've hidden it, but there it is. It's on my table or on my desktop. It had no problem churning through that. So resilient references is not just useful when you are explicitly changing the locations or file names of things, but intermediate tables that JMP will just name. Now it's resilient to those changes too. And so this comes up more often than you might think. Now, because of this resiliency to table name changes and to column name changes, there's one additional thing that this enables in JMP without really any work. And it's kind of magical, which is what I'm calling a pure template, a template for a workflow that was never written around a context, but was completely written around the concept of what you want to do. And so here I have one I built out, a two-way ANOVA template. And so this is a template that is meant to do, let's say, my favorite workflow whenever I do a two-way ANOVA. Distribution of Y, separate distributions of the factors of 1 and 2 to look at their levels, a conditional distribution of Y to look at normality based on the intersection of the factors, and then my actual fit model for factorial ANOVA. And so I'll bring open analgesics and let's hit play. And you'll notice that it's even prompting me with some special text. It says, select the table you want to use for this two-way analysis of variance. So I'll say use analgesics, and it says, okay, I need a Y response. I'll click pane. It'll produce that output because it's waiting until it encounters a reference that it doesn't know to prompt me. So it says factor 1, I'll pick gender. Factor 2, I'll pick drug, and everything produces. So without having to re-record a workflow for this new data table or for anything, when I have a template in my mind of what I normally do, I can now just build this template workflow and using a couple quick customizations, make it feel like this kind of template. And let me show you those customizations. Under the red triangle, under references, there's this manage section. And so the only thing I had to do to make this feel more template-like was I purposefully prompted with text. So I said, hey, when you don't find the table I recorded this on, which I called ANOVA template, prompt me by saying, select the table to use for this two-way analysis of variance. And then in the mode for prompting, I told it to prompt each run. And what that means is, even if for some weird reason that was the table I had named something that I was actually working on, it still would prompt me. It knows to not use any existing references, but instead always prompt you to replace them. Now, within this table, I had some columns that were referenced. I actually labeled them factor 1, factor 2, and Y response. And then I said in the prompt, same thing, always prompt me each run and select factor 1 variable, select factor 2 variable, select the Y response. That's really all that's needed. And now this workflow exists as a template. And again, I hope you trust me, building this was really just as easy as recording these one-off. And now I have this recorded in a templatized form. That's the concept of what I'm trying to do rather than the context. So Workflow Builder, it really is the place to record, replay, document, and demonstrate, but now also the place to generalize your workflows so that you can support your own work, no matter what the context is. But also, so if you support others, you can give them that generalized version of a workflow that matches however you think their work should be done. And they don't have to come knocking down their door when their column name changes or their table names change. So we're really excited about Workflow Builder. And going back to this question, there it is, to click or to code. I think our new answer in JMP 17 is go out and build. So John, back to
you. Thank you, Julian. And now let's summarize what we've seen. The themes in workflow. First, it should be fluid, not hindered by obstacles. Second, it should be guided. So we're told what steps to take. Finding features should be easy with the search facility. And it should be as fast as possible. It should be clear and concise in the text it produces. It should be collaborative, so you can collaborate and share and publish to your team members and stakeholders. And it should be remembered. So if you did it last week, doing it this week would be a lot easier, and especially with Workflow Builder. And we saw all these themes in all the new features in JMP 17. So available in a few weeks, JMP version 17 should improve your workflow. And when the workflow is smoother, you pay more attention to what the data is saying rather than paying attention to overcoming the next obstacle. You explore data and models in more ways, notice more, discover more, and get more done. Now, please let us know if you run into obstacles that inhibit your workflow. We want your feedback